Hi there, thank you for joining the first part of the How to Be a Savvy Supermarket Shopper series. My name is Rebecca Greco. I am a dietitian and the owner of Nourish Adelaide. My mission in life is to help people like yourself to improve your health through good food. Just a big thank you to the City of Unley for this opportunity to present this webinar today. After today's session, I hope you'll have a better understanding about how to read and interpret the Nutrition Information Panel, the Ingredients List, and also the Health Star Rating System, which is a fairly new system which, like the Nutrition Information Panel, is to help people make better food purchases. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to go onto my website and complete the contact form. I am more than happy to answer your burning questions. Throughout today's webinar, I will be comparing WEETBIX and NUTRI as examples. If you have a packet in your pantry, feel free to press pause and grab a box. Otherwise, don't worry, there are photos throughout this webinar. Before we begin, I would just like to say that today's webinar focuses on general health and wellbeing advice. If you have a chronic condition and are after more tailored and personalised advice for your needs, please click the link to my website to arrange an appointment with myself. I currently consult in Colonel Light Gardens and in Erindale, and I'm more than happy to have a chat with you to improve your health through good food. It can be difficult to know what the best options are when it comes to packaged food products. And this is no surprise with over 30,000 packaged products stocked in Australian supermarkets. Unfortunately, many of these foods can be misleading, making us believe that they are more nutritious than they actually are, which is why it is important to understand how to read a food label. Today, we will tackle some of this confusion and make you feel more confident making smarter food choices when doing your grocery shopping. In Australia, the law requires all packaged foods to carry labels containing safety and nutrition information. This information is usually found on the back of packaged foods and is known as the Nutrition Information Panel. This information should help you to make decisions about the food you buy and eat so you can follow a healthy and well-balanced eating pattern. However, like I said previously, many people can find this really confusing and hard to read as well. So I really hope to clear this confusion for you today. So this is what the Nutrition Information Panel looks like. Like I mentioned, I'll be comparing WEETBIX and NutriGrain today. When looking at the information panel, we also need to consider the ingredients list. Now, this list is ordered from the most to the least predominant ingredient used in the manufacturing of the food and is usually positioned adjacent or below the information panel. If one of the top 3 ingredients contains saturated fat, sugar, or sodium, then this is already a red flag that the food is probably an occasional treat rather than an everyday nutritious food. Through reading the ingredients list, you should have a better understanding of the nutrition and also a better understanding of health claims. Now, I'll be going into more detail about health claims in part 2 of this webinar series. So this is the ingredients list for WEETBIX. As you can see, there are 6 ingredients, and WEETBIX is predominantly made from whole grain wheat and contains the smallest amount of iron compared with the other ingredients. Now, NutriGrain contains 13 ingredients. It is predominantly made with cereals and contains the smallest amount of B group vitamins. So this is the Nutrition Information Panel for WEETBIX. Let's work from left to right of this panel. You will find that this table comprises of 3 columns. From left to right, the first column states the nutrients in the food. The second column is the amount of those nutrients per a serve. And the third column is the amount of nutrients per 100 grams. It is really important to note that when comparing products, you must look and compare using the per 100 gram column to ensure that you are comparing like for like. As you can see, the per serve of WEETBIX is 2 biscuits. Unlike the per serving of Nutrigrain, which is 1 cup or 40 grams. So we cannot compare the amount of nutrients with different portions unless we are looking at the per 100 gram column. Now let's look at the list of nutrients shown in the information panel, starting from the top. The first nutrient displayed is almost always the kilojoules or calories. Now these two nutrients are a measure of the amount of energy which is provided in the food. Just like how a car needs petrol to run, we need kilojoules to work, sleep, and breathe and do everything that we do in a day. Now 1 calorie is equal to 4.2 kilojoules. Keep this in mind for part 2 of this series of webinars. Now it is most important to check the kilojoules, especially when it comes to purchasing discretionary foods, and these are foods like chips, chocolate, soft drinks, and ice cream. The Australian Guide to Healthy Eating recommends that we eat no more than 2 serves of discretionary foods a day, which is the equivalent of 600 kilojoules for overall good health and well-being. Now looking at the kilojoules for WEETBIX, per 100 grams there's 1,490 kilojoules and 355 calories. Looking at the panel for Nutrigrain, per 100 kilojoules, it contains 1,550 kilojoules. To calculate the calories, we just divide this amount by 4.2. The second nutrient within the information panel is usually always fat. Now fat is the most energy dense nutrient, so if a food is high in fat, it will definitely be a kilojoule dense food. There are 4 types of fat, and at most the amount of total fat and saturated fat are recorded in the information panel. You want to be most wary of saturated fat because this type of fat raises our LDL or bad fat levels in our blood, which can put us at risk of heart disease over a long time as opposed to the monos and polys, which are beneficial for our heart health. Trans fats also negatively impacts our heart health when consumed in large amounts. And in Australia, it is not mandatory to record the amount of trans fats in the information panel unless the packaging mentions beneficial health claims related to cholesterol. I will go into more detail about this in the second webinar. Now, looking at the per 100 grams of the information panels, a healthy food choice is one which contains less than 3 grams of total fat and 1.5 grams or less of saturated fat. Now looking at the panel for WEETBIX, we can see that it contains 1.3 grams of total fat and 0.3 grams of saturated fat, which gives WEETBIX a big thumbs up in terms of its fat content. And with Nutrigrain, we can see per 100 grams it has 0.6 grams total fat and 0.1 grams of saturated fat. So again, it has a big tick of approval. Now there are many different ingredients which are really high in saturated fat. So if these 3 ingredients are high in the ingredients list, try to find a healthier option. When you can, always look for a reduced fat option, which is available for many foods like coconut cream and sour cream. Unsurprisingly, there is no ingredient which is largely made of saturated fat within WEETBIX. And the same goes for Nutrigrain. Now, sugars are usually the third nutrient in the list and are a form of carbohydrates. We need carbohydrates. They are really important for B group vitamins, which sustain us with good energy levels throughout the day. Now, there are two types of carbohydrates. The first being complex carbohydrates, which give us long-lasting energy throughout the day and are really nutritious. And we find these types of carbohydrates in fruits and veggies, dairy foods like milk, yogurt and cheese, and wholemeal breads and cereals. The second type of carbohydrates are what we call simple carbs, and they are often referred to as refined sugar. We find this type of sugar in all discretionary foods like cakes, biscuits, lollies, soft drinks, and this gives us the opposite benefit compared with complex carbs. These types of carbohydrates give us short, lasting energy throughout the day and are usually unhealthy and not very nutritious. So when you're looking at the amount of sugars per 100 grams, try to find a packaged food which contains 5 grams or less of sugar per 100 grams. Looking at the per 100 grams for WEETBIX, we can see that it contains 3.3 grams of sugar, which is a good bonus. On the other hand, per 100 grams of NUTRI contains 26.7 grams of sugar, which is about just over 5 teaspoons of sugar. This is definitely in the red zone and has a thumbs down. Now, it can be really tricky to understand the types of sugars that are within food, and this is where looking at the ingredients list comes into play. Don't forget that the ingredients list is ordered from the most predominant ingredient to the least ingredient used. Now, unfortunately, there are many different names for the word sugar, but here is a select list of the most commonly used ingredients, which are really high in sugar. Now, dairy foods like yogurt and milk are an exception to this rule. That's because dairy foods contain lactose, which is a naturally occurring sugar. Because of this, most dairy foods like yogurts and flavoured milk are going to contain a high amount of sugar. So the trick is to look for yogurt with no added sugar, or also look at the ingredients list to try and find the sources of sugar. If the sources are predominantly refined sugar, then you might want to find a yogurt which is a healthier choice. So looking at the ingredients list for WEETBIX, we can see that raw sugar is the second ingredient in the list. However, don't forget that WEETBIX is 97% made of whole grain wheat. Now, when we look at the list of ingredients for NutriGrain, we can see that sugar is the second ingredient in the list, but it also contains molasses, which is also known as black treacle, and this is why NutriGrain has such a high amount of sugar per 100 grams. Sodium is usually at the bottom of the panel and is essentially another word for salt. We know that eating too much salt is linked with blood pressure and heart disease. Did you know that approximately 80% of the salt we eat comes from packaged foods, not from what we add at the table, which is where people often think it's from? When you are down the aisles, try to find a reduced salt option when purchasing foods like canned soups, stock cubes, and baked beans. And when looking at the per 100 gram column, aim for 120 milligrams of salt or less. Looking at the sodium content of WEETBIX, per 100 grams it contains 270 milligrams, which is a thumbs up. And looking at the list for Nutri-Grain, there is 360 milligrams of sodium, which is in the middle of that amber traffic light system, so still a thumbs up. Just like fat and sugar, there are many different ingredients which are really high in salt, so keep this in mind when you are looking at the ingredients list. Looking at the list for WEETBIX, salt is the third ingredient. And looking at the list of Nutri-Grain, salt is in the middle. Now I thought I would chat briefly about fibre because it is a really great nutrient which is often forgotten when looking at nutrient information panels. Now fibre is a special different type of carbohydrate which we do not digest. Instead, our gut bacteria feeds on the fibre and ferments byproducts which help keep our gut healthy. Now when looking at the panel, a high amount of fibre in a food is a bonus, so the more fibre the food contains, the better. But try to find at least 3 grams of fibre per serve. Remember that fruits and vegetables are naturally high in fibre, and wholemeal and whole grain breads and cereals are higher in fibre than the white varieties, so this is a simple swap that you can make in your eating pattern to increase the amount of fibre you are eating per day. Looking at the amount of fibre per serve for WEETBIX, it contains 3.3 grams, which is another big thumbs up. However, looking at the fibre content of Nutri-Grain, there is only 2 grams of fibre per serve, which is another thumbs down for Nutri-Grain. Now the majority of fibre from WEETBIX is coming from the whole grain wheat, which is the ingredient mostly in WEETBIX. And looking at Nutri-Grain, a small amount of fibre is sourced from the flours and also from the oat fibre. Now let's chat about the Health Star rating system. This system is a visual system to help you make an informed decision more easily than reading the nutrition information panel. And essentially, the more stars, the healthier the food. Now this system is not without its flaws, so keep this in mind when looking at packaged products. The first flaw is that the system is compensatory, meaning that one negative nutritional attribute can be cancelled out or balanced by a positive attribute. And secondly, this system is only voluntary at the moment. So of course, you're not going to see a Health Star rating on a bottle of soft drinks, chocolate, ice creams, and on the front packaging of other types of discretionary foods. Now that we have deconstructed the information panel for WEETBIX, I think it is safe to say that WEETBIX deserves its 5-star rating. It is very low in sugar, salt, total fat and saturated fat, and really high in fibre, which makes WEETBIX an excellent breakfast choice. On the other hand, Nutri-Grain has a 4 out of 5 stars rating. Although Nutri-Grain is low in fat, saturated fat, and salt, it is really high in sugar and low in fibre, according to the traffic light system. When we compare both cereals side by side, we can see that Nutri-Grain is higher in sugar, sodium, and much lower in fibre compared with WEETBIX. Now, taking all of this into consideration, it has only lost 1 star compared with WEETBIX for a 4 out of 5 health star rating. So overall, I think the health star rating is a quick visual guide, but you do really need to look at the nutrition information panel and the ingredients list for the best understanding of the bigger picture and for you to make an informed decision about whether you want to purchase and eat that food. If you have any thoughts about the health star rating system, I would love to hear it. Just head onto my website and complete the contact form. I thought I would wrap up this session with some food for thought. Please remember that majority of our food groups within the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating do not have a nutrition information panel or ingredients list because we know these foods are nutritious and are really important for good overall health and well-being. For a healthy and balanced eating pattern, try and choose wholemeal and whole grain breads and cereals. And don't forget to look for dairy foods like flavoured milk and yogurt, which contain no added sugar for the healthiest choices. Now please stay tuned for the second part of this webinar series, where we will explore health claims, the marketing tricks to avoid, and also some of my favourite savvy grocery shopping trips. I hope you have enjoyed the first part of this webinar series. As mentioned, feel free to send me a message by heading to my website www.nourishadl.com and complete the contact form to ask any questions or comments. You can also click on the link for a no obligation chat about your health and eating pattern. If you have social media, please also feel free to follow me for news about my upcoming nutrition programs with the City of Unley. Thanks.